Hey there, it's Louisa Munson, and I've lost count of where I am in terms of my Venus retrograde videos, where I've devoted the whole of this Venus retrograde in 2023 to exploring love in astrology. So not strictly all about Venus, but that the whole path of love, from being ready to love somebody, to meeting them, to analyzing how love shows up in your charts and their charts, all the different sides of love I'm trying to decode astrologically right now. And I haven't really got a schedule for them. I'm just throwing myself in as something arises. I'm recording something. So in the last 3 episodes, I had a look at 3 different couples. One of those couples was me and my husband. And so each of these couples are couples who have both fallen in love with each other, and whose relationship charts I was looking at, i.e. the composite chart, the mixed chart between them. And also we were looking at the synastry as well, where one chart meets another, where one person's planets and angles are impacting the planets and angles of another. So, there's information there where you can see what was coming in at a certain time. So, I broke down what was happening in his chart, what was happening in her chart at the time that they fell in love. I've also done the same in terms of what was happening in his chart and her chart at the times of their marriage. And it's not to say I'm only looking at his and hers. They were just the 3 examples that I used. And I'm very, very happy to look at same-sex charts too. Essentially, the astrology works out the same. There's no differences. When one person loves another person, their charts interact. So in the next 2 episodes, what I'm going to look at is I'm going to bring together the learning of the last 3 episodes. So, in looking at 3 different couples, what did I notice was going on in each of their charts when they fell in love? Was there a coding? Were there some similarities? Were there some patterns? And so this is what this episode is dedicated to. And then in the next episode, I'm going to be looking at the patterns that came up in all 6 of their charts at the time of their marriage. And you'll see that there are some differences between meeting and falling in love with somebody to actually getting married. So let's have a look now. So I'm just going to add in the slides. So the first thing that I really, really noticed in terms of the amalgamation of all 3 charts was there were some very, very common aspects that were happening. And so the most common aspects that I noticed going on at the time when somebody meets somebody spectacular in their life is that they have transiting planets in a conjunction with their natal planets. Now, what do I mean by this? Just to recap, like this is a chart. This is actually my chart. And all of these planets inside in black represent where they were at the time, place, and date of my birth. Now, around the outside in green, that shows where the planets were at the exact time and place and date of when I met my husband, Carl. And so you can see most of them are actually down this corner here. And I've got those charts for every one of these 3 couples, so 6 people. And so the most common thing that happens at the time when you meet somebody is that it's a transiting planet moving over, like here. It's hard to see because we've got icons popping up here, there, and everywhere. But you can see on the outside in green, I've got a series of planets and asteroids in a conjunction with mine. And it was the same for pretty much the other people as well. What I noticed when I looked at this and wrote down which planets on the outside were impacting the planets on the inside, what I noticed was out of 6 people, 3 couples, there were 6 Venus conjunctions, i.e. Venus here in a conjunction with something in our charts. There were 3 Saturns, where Saturn is in an important place. Then there were 3 Junos. Now, Juno isn't really known as being a planet. She's considered an asteroid, and treated as such. But I use her in all of my readings. I think she's great. She's known as the goddess of marriage, and is also she has some kind of influence to do with sexuality and sensuality, commitment and dedication. And so Juno, there were three. So in 3 out of the 6 people had Juno over one of their planets in their birth chart. And then we had 2 Plutos. So Pluto moving over something, like my Pluto is right here, moving over my Venus, in fact, at the time of me meeting my partner. So they were the most common aspects, was a transiting planet, like a moving planet being in alignment with one of your planets. Now, the next most common pattern was that there were things transiting the natal Venus. Now, what I mean by that is, like, here's a natal Venus. This is Venus in your birth chart, hence natal, because it's about your birth. So one of the most common patterns was that we had something outside aspecting our Venus. So it's less about Venus aspecting something from the outside in. It's more about something on the outside, impacting our internal Venus. Then the next most obvious thing that I spotted with all these charts was that there were lots of transits to the 5th house. This is the 5th house. You'll see the houses go anti-clockwise from 9 o'clock. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth, right the way round to the 12th house. Now, the thing that struck me when I was looking at all 6 of our charts at the moment of falling in love is that we had outer planets, or a series of planets, in our 5th house, and that we had a series of planets in our 7th. They were the 2 most common houses. Now, I've spent a bit of time talking about the 5th house and the 7th house earlier on in this series. The 5th house is really known as a place of what we're birthing, and also romance, like early romance and early dating, really does get captured in this 5th house, because it's all about feeling good. And then the 7th house is about our partners and who we're projecting on, and also more, established relationships. It really is very much about our relationships. Then the next most common was, there were 2. So then we had aspects going on to the 4th house, which is interesting. I'm guessing the 4th house represents how we live, and our security, and a little bit about our behaviors based on what we know, like what we've learned throughout our life. It impacts our inner psychology. So it makes sense that the 4th house would also be affected, because, when we meet our other half, in all 3 cases, we all got together very, very quickly and moved in with each other very quickly. So it would affect the 4th house, which is about where we're living and how we're living. And then the last one is our identity, the 1st house. It's all about our personal identity, how we see ourselves. So obviously, when we're meeting a partner, not only is it bringing in romance and an actual relationship, it's changing the way we live, but it's changing how we think about ourselves. And then another really common common pattern was to have a slow moving planet in a conjunction with the angles. So really, by a slow moving planet, and I'm including Chiron in this. Chiron's here in this instance, going right over the ascendant, which is one of the angles. Like in this person's chart, it's the male, I think, from the first episode, couple 1. He's got his Saturn going over the descendant. Pluto, is very close to the IC there as well. So slow moving planets conjunct the angles is another pattern. And then there was just a couple of things I thought was interesting to highlight. This looked like a really important aspect. And I did pick it out when I was recording them, and I said, oh, that's something to watch. But Pluto in a conjunction to natal Venus showed up in a third of our volunteers. So it's in 2 of us. Pluto came into an alignment with Venus, which doesn't sound like much, just 2 out of 6. But actually, when you think about it, that's the third. And I know it as a pattern of intimacy from when I've worked with other people as well. So that seemed quite significant. So Pluto is the slowest moving planet that we acknowledge. I mean, there are trans-Neptunians and all sorts of other additional bodies we put in, but Pluto is known for control, and it's a sexual planet. It's also to do with wealth, but it's such a control and transformation planet. And of course, it comes in and it creates a change in the way we love and the way we love ourselves and the flow of our life. So that was an aspect watch. So I think they're really quite important patterns. So this is just a short one. So, if you are single right now and you're wanting to meet somebody, one of the great things that I would consider doing if I was in your shoes is I would look at my chart and start looking at where the planets are moving through your chart right now, and start to chart it out, start to make a note. In particular, you want to look at Saturn, because Saturn was high up there. Pluto was of interest. Juno was really of interest. And the most important one was Venus. And also, if you are single and looking for love or wanting to find the best times, you might also consider when is an outer planet, a slow moving planet, moving over your angles, or 4 of your angles. And you might also want to consider whether Pluto is going to connect with your Venus, or, and this is something else I would look out for, is what is about to connect with your Venus. So they are the top ones, I would say, the top suspects in meeting people. This was just a really small group. It's just 3 couples that I looked at in the previous episodes. However, I do recognize those. And if I had been asked without showing the evidence, I would have said, well, that's easy. You'll probably be looking at angles, planets going over your angles, lots of aspects between Venus and Juno, Pluto and Saturn. I probably would have put Neptune in there as well. I was surprised I didn't see more Neptune. However, let's see what comes up in the next episode, where I'm looking at the patterns associated with marriage from these 3 couples.